Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum. I'm Jason Romano. Today on the podcast, we welcome Jessica Kern from Tennessee State, their women's basketball coach. Jessica is a ball of energy, full of positivity and encouragement. Really love talking to her. I know you guys will like hearing her story. Before we get to our interview with Jessica, I want to tell you about sportspectrum.com and the Sports Spectrum magazine. We talk about it a lot on this podcast. It's our website, sportspectrum.com. Daily articles all day long on the intersection of sports and faith. A daily devotional at 6 a.m. to get your day started right, encouraging others in their walk with the Lord. This podcast and every podcast we've done, over 400 of them now, are there on sportspectrum.com. And our magazine, the pillar of this ministry, is founded on the magazine, stands on the magazine that was created and produced and released in 1985. Dr. J. Julius Irving was on the cover of the very first Sports Spectrum magazine. And 34 years later, the magazine is still going strong. It's a great deal. It's $18 to order the magazine for an entire year. Our quarterly magazine, you get 4 issues for just $18, and it helps support this ministry, but it's also a great tool for you to have, whether you want to give it to a kid. Maybe Coach Jess wants to get one for her son, BJ. Getting a copy of the Sports Spectrum magazine, great pictures, great articles, lots of encouragement in there, and expanding on the stories that we get to tell here on the podcast and on the website. So please consider subscribing to the Sports Spectrum magazine for just $18 for an entire year. Simply go to sportspectrum.com, click that subscribe button right at the top there on the website, and you're in for the Sports Spectrum magazine. Go to sportspectrum.com and subscribe today. Coach Jessica Kern from Tennessee State is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. She has had quite the journey to get to where she is now as the women's basketball coach at Tennessee State. She's beginning her 4th season there in Tennessee and became the 11th head coach in the program's history in April of 2016, where she came over from Mississippi Valley State. She's also had stints at Furman University and Division II Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. She was named the CIAA, Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association Coach of the Year for 2014-2015. In college, she was a 4-year letter winner at Penn State University, a 3-time All-Big Ten selection and team captain for, not the basketball team, but the track and field team, and graduated from Penn State in 2002, and then went on to play pro basketball all across the world. And we talk about that journey as well here on the podcast. She played in Australia, Germany, Switzerland, Romania, and Poland prior to her beginning her coaching career in basketball. Lots of fun stuff here from a very positive and energetic person, which for me, I'm all about all day long. Jessica Kern, Tennessee State women's basketball coach, joins us here on Sports Spectrum. Take a listen. Coach Jess, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning.
It's good to talk to you. It is morning as we're taping this, and I'm excited because I've been following you on Twitter for a while, and you always seem to be full of, this is just through Twitter, so it's hard to get a real gauge because I don't know you. This is the first time we've met, but it always seems like you're full of positivity, full of energy. Let's start there. First of all, I don't want to ask, is that real? Because I think it is real, but where does that come from?
Oh my God. So the crazy part is I definitely am not a social media expert.
Okay.
I'm not. I got Twitter when I was at Mississippi Valley State because we were in tiny little Itabena, Mississippi. And I said, well, listen, we got to get kids here somehow. So how do we get the word out? And so I started it, and I realized the more that I started navigating through social media, what I have given out in my coaching career, that kids that have played for me know this, I truly believe people need to see it every day. And the older I get and becoming a parent and then getting hit with those woes just every morning, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make it a mission to get up every day. because I have the 3 to 5 rule, and that usually means 3 to 5 things went completely wrong before you walked out the door.
Mm-hmm.
But at least we can put some form of positivity out in the air. And so I do in my daily regimen to get up and do it. Some days are better than others. Some days are worse than others, but there's enough going on in the world to complain about. So I do my absolute best to put it out there. So hopefully I can be the joy in somebody's day.
No, that's it, man. If you touch one person, I mean, I think it's worth being positive out there, and it certainly changes mindsets, including your own. Tell me about social media a little bit. This wasn't on my prep, but I just think it's fascinating to kind of understand about using that to not just to encourage others, but to get the Tennessee states and the Mississippi Valley states, I think you said, and other colleges that you've been to and places like that, just getting them publicity and showing people, hey, this place is a place that you should want to come to and check out. That's important, isn't it?
For sure. There is and I'm a Penn Stater. I graduated from Penn State University. Yep. There is a massive divide between the sort of the haves versus the have-nots. Let's say that.
Yeah.
And when you're a mid-major, low major, high major, you use your resources to the best way that you know how. I have been so lucky to consistently move up to a degree in levels of basketball with administrators that I really, truly believe in. And the way for us to get that message out is on social media. And you have to also listen to your recruits and listen to your players. And a lot of times kids are recruiting you just like you're recruiting them through social media. So the blessing and the curse with it is, it can crucify you, or it can be one of those things that if you control your narrative, it can work very well in your benefit. And I think that's what we've tried to do here. And sometimes, what the reality of the situation is, there may be not a whole lot to talk about. And then that's when I sell self, because I believe in the product of me. And I've had a lot of good people along the way, some under the radar, some a lot of people know, that have said, whatever you're putting out there, that's your brand. It's going to be your brand as a parent. It's going to be your brand as a coach and well after coaching. But social media is a tool, whether we like it or we don't. Like I said, that can either propel you to where you want to go, but you have to be extremely careful in controlling your narrative.
Yeah, especially when you're younger and you sort of have free fingers when you're in your teen years. And these kids that you call them kids, I think it's a great line for them because they're 18 to 22, the ones you're coaching, 17 to 20, whatever that is. And all they've known is social media. And they don't realize, I think, a lot of times when you're 12 and 13 and 14 and you're just spatting on Twitter about something and maybe you post something that you're not really proud of. And again, you're 12 or 13, but that can come back. And we've seen this over and over again with athletes, with anybody that's sort of become a public figure, that the trolls are there and they're going to try and dig up stuff from the past. So that controlling the narrative is a real thing.
It's big. It's big time. And, when it goes down to recruitment, I tell my staff all the time, I said, getting to know people's families is free. That has nothing to do with budget, but you have to know the backstory on a student athlete in its totality, social media included, to be able to meet them where they are. And we're huge here on making sure our young women disconnect face-to-face connection and contact, eye contact. It's a lost art. It's unfortunate. But I think it's our job in the seats that we're in. If people don't know and young people don't know, we have to make them know, because you and I both know the older we get, when you go into a place of business, especially, some of those things are just not tolerated. And some people just don't get a second life. So you're very correct.
Yeah. I mean, it brings back that human conversation, that human interaction that we all need. Jessica Kern is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Tennessee State opening up November 9th against Cincinnati Christian. College basketball is back, and we're so excited to get the basketball season going. Reading up on your journey, you mentioned Penn State. Your journey is kind of fascinating to me because just in doing my research, I was looking and I saw, high school sports, pretty good, played a bunch of sports, and then a ton of success, and then you go to Penn State. And am I correct? You didn't play basketball at Penn State, did you?
No, I didn't. I actually ran the heptathlon. I was a track and field athlete. And I had sort of a decision to make. I had every intention at that time to play basketball at Penn State. But I signed up for something that was groundbreaking at that time. We weren't too great in the Big Ten. Coach Beth Alford Sullivan, who is now the head coach at University of Tennessee, was my head coach. And she took a risk on me, man, and it paid off. And so I tell people all the time, I think that's why I'm not jaded to a degree in our business. I'm not a who's person. I'm just an X and O's person, and I'm all about relationships. And I think that's given me a very unique longevity in this business, because I got into it bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I really didn't have a backstory.
Yeah, but then you go and play pro basketball, which I thought was fascinating. So walk us through the whole idea of a track and field athlete on a very high level, obviously in the Big Ten and Penn State, and then going back to basketball. And I saw you played in places like Australia, Germany, Switzerland, Romania, Poland. Yeah. What a journey. Tell us about it.
It was insane. And I just want to thank my family, because they're just like, listen, this is bananas. But, you know, I tell, like, I have a young lady playing in Switzerland right now, Tia Wooten. October 13th, I'll be going over there to see her play. I truly believe in supporting my kids. But that sort of goes back in me saying, you know, guys, listen, nobody's really going to know your story. If you want to tell it, you got to be good at it to be able to tell it. And so one of my best friends, actually, when I graduated from Penn State University, she tore her ACL in Germany. My dad is originally from right outside of Kaiserslautern, Germany. And I said, you know, what does it pay? And she was like, $500. And I was like, I'm in it to win it. Let me know. And I mean, if you can imagine a track and field athlete literally just in a basketball uniform, there's no other way that I could possibly describe how I looked my first season. I just ran. Like, that was it. Run on defense, run for layups. And, you know, I was able to experience what that life was about. And when I came back, I was able to get into a circle with some agents that, you know, thought I could play at lower levels. And then my stats got pretty decent from there. But I think this is where the relationship part comes in. I was the player that was willing to do camps and clinics and meet with the locals and go to the local schools. And I want to tell you that my athletic ability is what continued to get me jobs. But I truly believe, honestly, being a decent person kept me getting jobs, and jobs getting paid at levels that women with WNBA experience were not getting at that time. And so I always had a teammate or a former teammate or someone I worked out with that highly recommended me to a club GM, and it propelled me to the next level. Australia, shout out to everybody, all the Aussies out there. It's some of the toughest basketball I've ever played in my life. It's physical, it's fundamental, but it showed me my last couple years that I knew I was sort of kind of ready for the next phase of my life. And the next phase of my life was I was a better coach than I was a player. Bucharest, Romania was amazing. And it was amazing because when I tell you people that have less, that are doing a whole lot more, it was nice to see how committed people were to their craft. And Switzerland was fun. It was a lot of fun. And so I look back on it and I was able to see the world and still am seeing the world, you know, at no cost. And it was an amazing journey. So that's sort of kind of why I think I gravitate a lot more to mid-majors with young ladies that have backstories, because my entire career has been one new chapter after another. I wouldn't change it for anything.
Give me a story. Give me one of those overseas. I'm sure you got a million of them, but a crazy story of something that took place, whether it was on the court, away, just adapting to life in Australia, Germany, Romania, Poland, Switzerland, wherever it might have been. Give us a story.
I'm going to give you this story about the goodness of people.
Okay.
So when I was in Switzerland, there was no, like, cell phones didn't work like they work now.
Yeah.
I was walking, remember the Jarman, the GPSs, the Garmin?
Sure.
I took mine from the US. I'm thinking that, you know what, I'm going to be walking around and I'm going to figure this out. Well, when I first get there, they give me a stick shift. I've never driven a stick in my life. So I'm like, I got to get to practice. Just put the GPS in the car. Like, you're going to know where to go. They laminated me a card like I was my 7-year-old son. My name is Jessica. This is my address. And I was like, all right, I go to get on a hill. And I had no idea why I was going backwards. And I didn't know how to shift in gears. I didn't know that I'm just like, oh my God, I'm going to crash. So I let it slowly go backwards down the hill till I hit a curb. And the car just stopped. So I'm like, screw it. I got to get to practice. So I take the GPS off. I start walking.
Wow.
And first of all, I can't tell my coach that, like, I really don't know where the car is. Secondly, I can't really call my teammates because there's only one that speaks English. My German is extremely broken. And so I literally felt like a 7-year-old kid with a GPS that only spoke English and had no idea where I was going. I took my little laminated card to this coffee shop, and I told this guy, I said, listen, I'm the American player here. I'm trying to get to the gym. I know it's not far from here. Can you help me? And a small owner from that coffee shop put me in his car and took me to practice. And my coach was like, why didn't you call me? I was like, because I didn't think you would really even know what I was saying. But I say it to say, number one, I'll never drive a stick shift another day in my life. Number two, the goodness of people. And I think it just goes back to like the nonverbal communications. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We were able to communicate enough to get me to practice. I still got a paycheck. I was able to play games. And then at the end of the day, allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to trust people. So it was a little scary, obviously, at the time. But to me, that was because the guy that I met ended up being one of my best supporters there. He owned like a record store and a coffee shop and introduced me to other Americans. And these are some people actually that I communicate to this day when looking to get foreign players. So things come full circle. So that's a really good memory. God knows I have some drag out, tough it out memories on the court, but that's one of my positive memories. And just overall in the goodness of people and how sports can just expose us to doing more and being more than we probably thought we ever could be.
Yeah, that's such a great story. Jessica Kern is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, and we are the intersection of sports and faith. So let's intersect this conversation a little bit with your faith background. Tell us a little bit about growing up, what faith was like. Was that a thing for you in your life? And maybe kind of come full circle to where you are now with your faith in God.
Sure. I have a very interesting story. I was not really raised in the church. That doesn't necessarily mean we didn't go to church on Sundays. My backstory. So I am biracial. My dad's white. My mom's black. And to take it just even a little bit deeper, my dad is German.
Yep.
My grandfather fought in the German War. My grandfather, God rest his soul, was a racist in his own right. And my dad dates and marries a black woman, which probably didn't bode well.
Yeah.
And then my mother's father had a Muslim background. And so when I tell you it was sort of a conflict, the German side of my family, we weren't really churchgoers. We weren't really touchy-feely people, period.
Yeah.
But we were blue-collar, hard-nosed workers. My mom's side of the family, we'd go to church. We'd pray, but I just knew that was sort of kind of the thing that you do at meals and that kind of stuff. And that was really it. Well, my parents started going through a divorce when I was 2 years old, and it took 10 years, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I had gone to church, just over time with teammates and friends and things of that nature. It did not take until Penn State University, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, my freshman year, and having this overwhelming feeling of something being bigger than myself, walking to the altar and sort of kind of feeling like I'm having an out-of-body experience to realize, like, this faith thing is sort of kind of real.
Yeah. And
the irony behind all of that is, as from a performance perspective, that's when my career sort of started taking off. I am a Christian. I am Baptist. And I have been lucky over my time to have church homes and extended church families, because we travel everywhere we go, that have tremendously kept their hands on me. But my parents divorced from me. And again, this is why I went into coaching. From the inside out, when people say it breaks you, we oftentimes don't know. And I have two very loving parents that support me in all that I do. But I don't think a lot of times as adults, when we make decisions, we don't realize the long-term effect that it does make on young people. Yeah. And there were so many things when you're a biracial kid, you don't necessarily talk like everybody. Your hair is not necessarily black. It's not really white. You're built a little different. It's a lot of different things. And then you have two cultures that are trying to love you, but are at conflict sort of kind of at the same time. And so when I found and gave my life to the Lord my freshman year in college, it has been an absolute whirlwind since then. And it's been a lot of highs and lows. And sometimes I'll be very candid, more lows than highs. But it's always come back to a word that is consistent with me, that is steadfast for me. And I always like to tell people publicly, I cannot recite a scripture to you just off the top of my head. I'm not that guru. I'm not.
Right.
But I will say that I read my word every day. And I will say in times of anxiety, in times of pain, in times of joy, when you just need to give thanks for things that you don't even know what to be thankful for, but just do it because it has been my quiet in every single storm that I've been in. And I'm beyond grateful that I continue to get delivered in times that I probably wasn't deserving. And that is really my backstory and my journey. And I have learned in this journey that being broken is a commonality that I've had to learn to publicly embrace, especially with a lot of young women. And I think that's all faith-based, knowing that I'll always be forgiven. I can be fixed. And it's just not me, and I think that revolves all around that. So I hope that helped a little bit in my journey. It was a little later in life, but I'm so grateful for it.
It's a great story. And it was interesting because, when you're doing research, you kind of check social media pages. And I was on Instagram looking at your post I think it was a few months ago, or even more recently. It was a post with your son. And you said something to the effect of difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations. And I thought that was such a great line. Can you kind of expand on that and maybe walk us through? You don't have to go into detail if you don't want.
Sure,
share whatever you want in terms of the difficult roads that you kind of just mentioned and how the Lord has kind of helped bring you through them and why it's so important to embrace, which is so difficult, the trials that come into our life. James talks about that in the New Testament, about just considering it joy when trials come. It's like, nah, I don't want it to be a joy when I'm going through this, but why they're so important into helping us grow.
There are so many stigmas in life and in our business that I have had to counteract that I did not think would be roadblocks to a degree. There are very few women that look like me in this business that are in head seats and do it well.
Yeah.
There are very few administrators, period, female administrators that are dynamic, boisterous, and look like me and do it well. And over my entire career, I've been so lucky, and I have to give a shout out to historically Black colleges and universities. They, at the beginning of my career, were one or few that was willing to take a risk on a young woman who had an unconventional background. And I will say this to absolutely anyone. Once I get to a boardroom, shout out to Penn State University and the School of Communications, I feel like I can rock it. But I just needed an opportunity. And for me, it came very early. First head coaching job at Lincoln University of Pennsylvania in the CIAA. Dianthea Fordkey, who's the AD at Mississippi Valley State now, became a mentor to me. I got pregnant when I was 30, which was always the end goal for me. I never wanted to be a young mom, wanted to be established. And you would think in the day and age in which we are in right now, that, getting pregnant, having a child with an established man, we try to live right and we try to do right by people. The forms of judgment that came behind that in this business were uncanny. And it opened my eyes up to, this is a very vain business. And I began to see 7 years ago, because BJ is 7, I began to see that I'm going to have to be tough as nails in this thing and do it with grace. And I'm not going to be able to do it alone. To be judged, to be a single parent, is tough. Being a single parent, being a parent, period, is very difficult. And not only are you trying to take over a program, not only are you hearing from many different people, this is the beginning and end of your career. I'll never forget these conversations. And I've got this young person who sees absolutely no wrong in me. I had to make a decision. And I had to make a decision, either it's going to be you and I, champ, regardless of how this thing pans out, or I'm going to throw in the towel. And I chose to stick it out. Along the way, however, I don't look like many people. I don't dress like many people. I've always very much so prided myself in dressing to impress, whether I was making $5,000 as a GA or not. That was something that mentor said, listen, you've got to look the part, and you always find a way. You find a way. I am very adamant about equity. I am very adamant about a disciplined woman being a free woman. And I had to learn over the years that sometimes you have to walk quiet with a very big stick, but there are non-negotiables that you refuse to waver on. And for me, my family, and my definition of family, was the unwavering non-negotiable, that I would not go into jobs or career paths if it didn't work in his best interest. That does not come without kickback. And I have received a lot of kickback. I have, been to universities that are, in the Bible Belt, and we just don't do those things here. We think you're a great candidate, but it will not be accepted by boosters and donors and alumnus. And that's something you have to take with grace. BJ has, and I love to say this part, after a 10-year journey, and committing myself to my craft and my child, God sent me a man, and an entire man that took me for everything that I was, which is high strung, which is high octane, which is energy all day, every day. I'm very boisterous, and sent me somebody who was my complete opposite. That was the yin to my yang. And the covering, when we go back to faith, that I've had over my career, I do not have the story that people that are legends have. I don't. And I understand that. And sometimes in this business, it's been used as a deterrent. There are inner circles and outer circles in our business. But I find myself telling people that your light is going to shine where it was predestined to shine. You just have to make sure that you own your craft and know what you're doing when you get there. Do right by people. The right way is always the right way. And that's not going to come without people chastising. It's not going to come without judgment. But that is the time in which you surround yourself by great people, have a great infrastructure, and do right by people and pray that it comes full circle. And so that in its essence, this business, especially after I had my son, wasn't necessarily very forgiving. But the flip side of that is I have in return received so much support from counterparts in this business that I never even knew. I've met people that in a million years I never would have thought knew me, would speak to me, or even are motivated by what I do. Yeah. And so for those reasons, you keep going. And you keep going on the ugly days. As a matter of fact, I talked to my staff yesterday. It was a really tough day yesterday. Just a lot of fires to put out. Sure. And this morning I walked in and they said to me, listen, there's a couple of things we need you to know, but we've got it. We've handled it. We're going to rock out today at practice. And we did. And we did. Yeah. And that is what BJ running around the sideline, getting balls and water bottles, and then go change yourself for school. And did you do your homework? And did you eat your breakfast? And so eventually when you get this thing down, the enemy and the daggers that are coming at you, you realize that it's not you because it's you. You realize because you're destined to make a shift. And usually the shift is a way in which the enemy isn't ready to receive it. That's really good. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell me, Jess, because I think can I call you Jess? I'm sorry, Jessica.
Yeah, of course.
One of the things I like to ask coaches are, because you mentioned mentors that you've learned from, but you're doing a lot of pouring into, whether it's your son, whether it's your girls that you're coaching, even your staff that you're working with. So you're pouring into, and the tank can get empty. So who's filling up your tank? Who's pouring into you, whether it's basketball related, family related, but even just as important, if not more important, spiritually related? Who's pouring into you? How do you stay poured into?
Sure. I think a lot of times when, we reach a certain plateau, and again, this is the vanity part of our business. People assume that with higher salaries, that you are able to do more on the lavish side of things. Well, I've taken a totally different approach to that. I have learned that a part of my fiscal budget every year has to be people that assist me with my balance, i.e. life coach, i.e. A pastor that sometimes is my life coach as well,
Sure.
that I can Skype, I can FaceTime, even when I can't sit in church, and make sure that my tithes automatically come out every single week, and that I can organically allow to pour into me, receive it, be vulnerable, but on my ugly days, be able to be ugly. A family that, if I need them, can be here for me, even though they're distant. I will say this, mental health is everything. Counseling is huge. And I know, especially in the African-American community, we don't necessarily want to talk to people about our shortcomings.
Sure.
But I've also learned that your coworkers and your staff, as much as a family as you are, cannot be your fix-it as well, because they are looking to obviously make strides in this industry as well. I have taken on a nanny to assist me, and I've had to, say personally, listen, what are you willing to sacrifice? Because your son does not deserve to skip a beat in being a kid.
Right.
He should still be able to do his sports and, his fun times. And on Saturdays when mommy has a game on the road, you should still be able to go to birthday parties. And we've been able to do that. And we have a blended home. 2 dads and me who share holidays, share vacations. And I've had to learn to relinquish to be able to have the power in which I know that I can have. Now, that definitely didn't come overnight. Last year, for me, from a professional component, not just wins and losses, was one of the roughest years in my career.
Yeah.
And I think now, hindsight, looking back, you don't understand going through it, but you now understand why you had to. And it allowed me to see a lot of things in my craft that I needed to do better with. Personally, that I needed to be vulnerable enough to say and receive, these are something that you need to work on. But it also allowed me to see that as much as I'm pouring into people, I have to organically pour into people with my good and my bad.
Yeah.
So there's a relatability factor. I think sometimes
that's hard,
we get detached. Yeah, we get so detached at the end goal that you forget to relate and to meet a 27-year-old where they're at, and so it takes a complete village. My tank has run empty. I do know how that feels at times. I talked to many different coaches about, anxiety, feeling a sense of over being overwhelmed, or that your best isn't maybe good enough on that day. And we go back to social media. I think a lot of times people get very confused that these are 10 to 20,000 of your closest friends. That's not necessarily the case. These are people that sometimes, although as much as they support you, you've got to have that inner circle that good days, bad days are indifferent. Money, no money, career, no career, are still there to pour into you. And I've found that. And that circle has remained the same circle since the beginning of my career. So it takes quite a few people to be successful. And I've learned that, and I'm learning at 39. I'll actually be 39 tomorrow. Is
There
it
you
tomorrow?
go. Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. Tomorrow.
That's awesome.
26th of September. I've learned you've got to let people pour into you, or you're not going to get the most out of your better self.
That's great. Well, happy birthday. Happy early birthday, I should say. Embrace that 39. I'm 46, and life moves fast, we'll just say, Jessica.
I hear that.
It does. So let's end it with this. This has been a really great conversation. We ask this to all of our guests on the show. What are you learning from God today? Because there's so much that he teaches us really every day. It's a new lesson each day in many ways. When we're in the Word, when we're just out in the world teaching, God is teaching us something new. So what are you learning from him today?
Today, I am learning, as coaches, we go to bed putting out fires, and we wake up to fires, a text, a call, an email, something that needs to be fixed. I am learning daily, not just, I am learning every single day. God is pouring into me that I have to wake up and I have to go to bed with a joyful heart. And when I do that, I am a better partner. I'm a better mom. I'm a better coach. I'm a better sister. I'm a better leader in general. And making conscious efforts to do that daily has allowed me to think with a clearer head, be more of a Christian and pay it forward to those that need to be poured into on that day. It doesn't feel like a task, and it doesn't feel like a duty. It's seamless.
Yeah.
And I think that's changing my life. I really, really do. And more importantly, I think it's allowing my scale to be my scale and my walk to be my walk. And it really has changed. It really, really has changed my life. And it's made me open my eyes at how many people are walking around daily in conflict. And so I think that's what God is pouring into me, going to bed and waking up with a joyful heart.
Jessica Kern, you are an encouragement to me. You're awesome. My daughter could play for you any day, and I really do appreciate you.
Let's go!
Absolutely. Let's do it. She's a volleyball player. She's not basketball, but that's okay. But listen, you're awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story, and let's do it again sometime.
Sounds good. Jason, you're amazing. I appreciate you greatly.
Great stuff there from Jessica Kern, a great encouragement to me, the Tennessee State women's basketball coach. Keep an eye on Coach Jess and the Tennessee State team this year. Give her a follow over on Twitter at Coach_J Kern, or just search Jessica Kern. You'll see her there. Awesome profile picture of her hugging her little boy, BJ, Bobby Collins, and just an awesome woman, really. I'm just thankful that she was willing to come on the podcast and share her story. Not an easy one. But man, she comes out, and I loved her. A couple of notes, what she said. She said, having a joyful heart every day, going to bed and waking up. That's a great way to think, no matter what happens in our life, that we can go to bed with a joyful heart, even in the very difficult situations. She also referenced ugly days, which I love. I love the word. Sometimes we just have bad days. She called them ugly days. And one of the things she said was that, to quote, keep going on the ugly days. And those ugly days are going to hit us all. We're going to have difficult times. We're going to have trials, and to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep persevering, to keep pushing in, to keep pressing into God and His Word and what the Lord says, and just asking Jesus for mercy and help, and whatever it is, keep pushing forward, keep going. So great stuff there from Jessica Kern. Give her a follow on Twitter. Let her know that you heard her story on Sports Spectrum. We truly do thank you for listening to this podcast. We are grateful to you. The second you hit play and you tune into this interview, it just means so much to us, and it's an opportunity for you to be encouraged, hopefully, in your faith, but then to share that. And that's really where I'm going with this right now, is to just consider sharing the Sports Spectrum content that we put out, whether it's the podcast, the website, the magazine that you can get for just $18. Yet again, I'll give another plug for the magazine on sportspectrum.com, but just consider sharing it with someone else, whether they're believers or not, just encouraging them, letting them know about Sports Spectrum. I still, to this day, Sports Spectrum has been around 34 years, and when I tell people about Sports Spectrum, they're not familiar with it. And these are people who are sold out people in the faith and trusting in God and trusting in Jesus, and don't know about Sports Spectrum. And when they find out, they're just overwhelmed. They're like, that's awesome. I didn't know this existed. And it's definitely something that we rely on you guys for. Certainly we're grateful to you for listening, but we're also grateful to you for sharing. So thank you for considering and doing that. Whether it's through your social media pages or just sending a text, letting them know about this podcast, we are grateful to you. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again tomorrow with a brand new episode on Sports Spectrum's podcast. We hope you have a great rest of your day.